to the salt of the streets, coming at you every week with this food for thought. Hope you ready to eat. With everything going on in this nation, we need some information, and that's why salt need to be stationed in your rotation. With real talking, real topics, real people, real problems. Think we need some help to solve them, and leave it up to Colin and the Donovan. Cause that's what's that? Oh, let's get ready. Welcome to the salt of the streets, coming at you every week with this food for thought. Hope you ready to eat. With everything going on in this nation, we need some information, and that's why salt need to be stationed in your rotation. With real talking, real topics, real people, real problems. Think we need some help to solve them, and leave it up to Colin and the Donovan. Cause that's what's that? Oh, let's get ready. Welcome to the salt of the streets, coming at you every week with this food for thought. Hope you ready to eat. With everything going on in this nation, we need some information, and that's why salt need to be stationed in your rotation. With real talking, real topics, real people, real problems. Think we need some help to solve them, and leave it up to Colin and the Donovan. Cause that's what's that? Oh, let's get ready. Welcome to the salt of the streets, coming at you every week with this food for thought. Hope you ready to eat. With everything going on in this nation, we need some information, and that's why salt need to be stationed in your rotation. With real talking, real topics, real people, real problems. Think we need some help to solve them, and leave it up to Colin and the Donovan. Cause that's what's that? Oh, let's get ready. Welcome to the salt of the streets, coming at you every week with this food for thought. Hope you ready to eat. With everything going on in this nation, we need some information, and that's why salt need to be stationed in your rotation. With real talking, real topics, real people, real problems. Think we need some help to solve them, and leave it up to Colin and the Donovan. Cause that's what's that? Oh, let's get ready. salt of the streets, coming at you every week with this food for thought. Hope you ready to eat. With everything going on in this nation, we need some information, and that's why salt need to be stationed in your rotation. With real talking, real topics, real people, real problems. Think we need some help to solve them, and leave it up to Colin and the Donovan, cause that's what's that? Oh, let's get ready. Welcome to the salt of the streets, coming at you every week with this food for thought. Hope you ready to eat. With everything going on in this nation, we need some information, and that's why salt need to be stationed in your rotation. With real talking, real topics, real people, real problems. Think we need some help to solve them, and leave it up to Colin and the Donovan, cause that's what's that? Oh, let's get ready. Welcome to the salt of the streets, coming at you every week with this food for thought. Hope you ready to eat. With everything going on in this nation, we need some information, and that's why salt need to be stationed in your rotation. With real talking, real topics, real people, real problems. Think we need some help to solve them, and leave it up to Colin and the Donovan, cause that's what's that? Oh, let's get ready. Welcome to the salt of the streets, coming at you every week with this food for thought. Hope you ready to eat. With everything going on in this nation, we need some information, and that's why salt need to be stationed in your rotation. With real talking, real topics, real people, real problems. Think we need some help to solve them, and leave it up to Colin and the Donovan, cause that's what's that? Oh, let's get ready.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to Salt the Streets podcast, the show where we discuss news, government, and culture, and how it all pertains to you, the individual, and your natural rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I, as always, am one of your co-hosts. I am that big bird-looking fella they call Colin, and unfortunately today, I am not joined by my co-host, brother-in-arms, the Nero of Neoprene, the original Salt of the Streets himself. Donovan is out hard sick with a nasty migraine today. So after a little bit of discussion between me and him this morning, we decided to just carry on the best we can, considering I had some personal issues going on last show, and we just didn't really want to let another show day go by without at least something for you fine fellas. Zeke, Bilbo Swaggins, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming back, everybody. Good to see you guys. Today is going to be, like I said, it's going to be a little bit of a, probably a shorter show. I don't know if I have the wherewithal myself to go on 6 hours by myself, but we're going to do the best we can. Hey, so right off the bat, we're going to be diving into two major topics today. The original two main segments that Donovan and I had been planning for the last few weeks, and that is going to be, as you might have seen in the thumbnail, segment one is going to be what we call spend, where we're going to be discussing the current state of inflation. We're going to be looking at the Inflation Reduction Act, aptly named, obviously, and a little bit of the spending in regard to the war in Ukraine. And then after that, segment two, we're going to be talking about the powers that be. And that's going to be diving into, of course, the ongoing shit show that is the raid on the former president's house and the current investigation going by the FBI and so on and so forth regarding, former President Donald Trump and what he may or may not have been doing. And, of course, the entire infrastructure and design of the FBI and some of the problems behind it, and then just overall the major powers at play here that are, as always, ever trying to control every inch of your life. So without any further ado, today is August 20th. This is episode 131, and the time is approximately 12:13 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So without any further ado, let's jump into today's mini episode. The first thing I wanted to do in particular, Donovan isn't here, but I do have something of a let me ask you this question that I'm going to pose to you, the audience out there who's listening or watching. And Donovan, when you're feeling better, you can pick up on this yourself. But I wanted to ask, considering everything that's going on these days and some of the themes that we talk about here on the show, and particularly the, for lack of a better term, the ideologies that we have essentially prescribed ourselves to, the morals and the ethics that we've been diving into and discovering for ourselves. When you find yourself agreeing or aligning with a set of values and morals and ethics that may not necessarily align to the societal structure, the governmental structure that we currently find ourselves in our everyday reality, how is it that you balance your ideological morals and ethics with the current reality that we find ourselves in? And so for me, I like to think of myself as an anarchist. I don't believe that the de facto authority of the state, which you had zero, what's the word I'm looking for? Oh, it's always right on the tip of my tongue. You had zero, you didn't agree to it at all. It's not the word I'm looking for, but we're going to go with it. I didn't agree to this. I didn't consent. There it is. I did not consent to this structure at all, the structure of authority that is imposed over me, and thus I believe that it does not have the right to dictate my life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. It is not okay in my book. There is zero de facto authority that I have essentially signed on to. And so that's like the boilerplate level of why I find myself as an anarchist. I don't believe that anybody should have some kind of de facto authority to just clamp down on your rights and how you live and so on and so forth. But I am confronted with the reality of the situation that we all find ourselves living in. We don't live in an anarchist society, and I don't think that realistically, I don't think we ever will, at least not in my lifetime. So how is it that I balance my morals and ethics taken from my research and my readings and investigations into anarchism? How do I balance that with this crazy giant governmental system that we find ourselves in today? And for me, I guess the easiest way for me to look at it is when I truly boil it down, the individual rights aspect of things is the most important. Your individual liberties and freedom is the most important thing. In this country, we have a pretty decent set of moral guidelines laid out in the Bill of Rights that I think is a pretty good guidepost that, as somebody that prescribes himself as an anarchist, I could easily kind of flex myself to get to that place where that it's okay for me to have some form of a federal government if we were to prescribe to only those aspects laid out in the Constitution. Or if I really, really wanted to get into it, I'd say let's nix the Constitution. Let's just focus more on the Articles of Confederation. But I also understand that that's not even a reality anymore either. The federal government has grown to a size that is untenable, obviously, as we'll later discuss, I think, mostly in part 2 today. But if I was to move forward and continue to exist and participate in the system of representative democracy that we have in America, using our system in place of voting for representation, if I could appeal to or look for representatives that truly embody the values centered around my own values based in anarchism, with the exception of the state has to exist, then that would be something that I think I could use on balance to justify my existence and participation in this insane system that we have today. Let me see. Bilbo, I believe all people should be able to dictate their self. We should be responsible enough for that. Government only needs to take care of infrastructure, military, and foreign affairs. That's about my tilt right there, Bilbo. There's a lot of hard questions, and if you guys are subscribers to our Patreon, I know I'm not a huge fan of Patreon, but hey, you got to have some kind of system to work within, right? Like we just talked about. We put out a monthly newsletter, and I am working on an ongoing series now, kind of describing some of my takes on anarchism and looking at some of the stereotypes and falsehoods that are painted around that. And in one of the pieces upcoming, there will be discussion on some of what I call the hard issues in anarchy, and that is definitely one of them. I could get around infrastructure pretty easily. I don't think that needs to be involved at a governmental level. But when it comes to especially things like military and foreign affairs, those are really hard questions to tackle when it comes to my own anarchist views and my values. There are prescribed ways or proposed ways that may get around that kind of system. But it's really easy at that point to start devolving away from that ultra decentralized individual right and consenting authority at that point. It gets really difficult to do that without some form of a very largely agreed upon system of, no other term, but authority for that. So yeah, that is this episode's Let Me Ask You This. Bilbo Swaggins, thanks for that, buddy. That was great. So there was one thing I did want to cover real quick before diving into today's main topic, some light banter, if you will, on the pop culture side of things. I just finished up last night. It's a heavy lift to watch this thing because it's basically a movie at this point. But me and my wife have worked our way through the latest season of Stranger Things. And I have gone from relatively resident and not exactly fully on board the first, say, third of the season to after polishing off last night's 2.5 hour long season finale. I can safely say that I enjoyed this season. I was an overall fan of it, and I still continue to look forward to next season because no spoilers or anything, but they certainly did. They could go cut for cut, scene for scene, continue on into a season 5 if they so please, and I would imagine they would, because I feel like when it comes to the Netflix world, Stranger Things is probably one of, if not the cornerstone of the entire Netflix business model at this point. Spending time with the girl, William Wallace. Thanks for stopping by, buddy. I miss you. I hope everything is great in your side of the world. Zeke, I don't know if I said what up to you, but always good to see you here. So without any further delay, let's jump into today's first segment. And this is perfect because I didn't come up with any of these names. I got to give all the credit to Donovan on this one. It's what we're calling spend, 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 baby. Let's see. Switching over. Boom. Here we go. So we're going to dive into spend, 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 looking at inflation, the ridiculously named Inflation Reduction Act, and, of course, the insane spending going to the conflict in Ukraine. Bilbo Swaggins, I loved season on, didn't care for season 1, didn't care for 2, and never saw 3. I will say season 2, we'll just hammer this out real quick before we dive into the inflation talk. Season 2 for me was also kind of I didn't really get into it that much. Season 3, I was really hesitant and I only got into it because I was like, well, it's Stranger Things. I got to watch this. And if it turns into just another Game of Thrones pile of, crap, then it's over for me and I never have to watch it again. But then I found myself actually enjoying season 3. I'd say give it a shot. As per most shows, you got to give it a few episodes. And I know that's a big time commitment when it comes to something like Stranger Things because those episodes are not short. But by the end of season 3, I was happy with it. And then, again, that brought me right into season 4, which I, in retrospect now, thoroughly enjoyed throughout the whole thing. One day, if I'm feeling really, really crazy, I might just try to hash my way through the entirety of all 4 seasons again and see how they stack up back to back to back to back to back. And when it comes to a show like Stranger Things or even like Game of Thrones, we really think about it, having a year or 2 in between seasons, that's no way to tell a story, man. That's no way to tell a story. If you're involved in like a book series, like I have one of my favorite authors is a fantasy author named Michael J Sullivan. He writes all of his books out at once before even bringing them to the publishers or the editors, anything like that. And that way he knows no matter what happens, the old Stephen King problem of like what happens if I get hit by a bus and then I can't finish the season off. That never comes into play. So no matter what happens, everything comes out in a timely manner and the whole story can be told. I understand with television is different because I would guarantee that there is not such a thing as season 5 of Stranger Things written right now. But who knows? I would hope that they do, and then at that point I want to get that whole Stranger Things story arc at once to really weigh it out as a whole. It's hard to do with long-running shows, obviously, and even Stranger Things being an hour plus per episode is really difficult. Anyways, enough of that. Let's get back to inflation. Boom. Inflation rate. As of this past month, when they assessed inflation the way they always assess inflation, which I have a hard enough time on its own, but working within the structure that we work within, the CPI, balance on with the PPI and things like that, the various price indexes. Inflation, I don't want to say fell, but the rate of inflation was slower in July than it was in June by, I think it was like 1%, less than 1%. It went from 9.1% year over year to 8.5. That on its whole was sold to the American people, particularly by the White House and President Joe Biden, as we had zero inflation this month, which was an absolute fucking lie. Which should surprise nobody, because if there's anything the White House is good at, it's lying to the American people. But what we have now is still one of the highest inflation levels in our living history at this point. I think for most anybody that's alive now, unless you're a boomer, this is the highest we've seen since the 80s, since the late 70s. 8.5 is still terrible. Now, Why did it go down a little bit, though? Why did it go down? Is this a sign of things getting better? No, it's not. I can tell you that right now. One of the ways they were able to drop the overall CPI was by taking on balance the lowering and dropping of gas prices, which the White House, again, is so very proud of touting as if it was something that they actually did, after telling us for months and months on end that they can't do much with gas prices. So, the executive can only do so much. They can't just lower gas prices. But apparently they could take credit for it when it does drop. So why did gas prices drop? Gas prices dropped because, surprise, surprise, Americans are driving less because the price at the pump is still higher than it was over a year ago. And of course, what happens in pricing in commodities, it's always a delayed reaction to the price. The reflection in price is always a reaction to the market. It does not generally pre-act, if that's a word, act before something happens, unless you're talking about the stock market, which is a different thing. But when it comes to prices of commodities, the reason gas has lowered, it's not because the war in Ukraine is looking better. It's not because Biden has opened up a bunch of drilling wells and his outlook on fossil fuels has changed so that the entire fossil fuel industry is now very... They look with favor upon the future. That has nothing to do with it. It's because people quit driving as much. When diesel is $7 a gallon, of course you're not going to drive very much. What we're seeing now is a delayed reaction to that drop in driving miles. So I've got an article here from Bloomberg. I'll just read a little bit of it. Americans are driving less, combining errands and shopping, or driving out less, or dining out less since gas prices railed in March, according to a survey by the Auto Club AAA. A survey of 1,002 U.S. adults, which, okay, first of all, you're AAA. You probably have millions of drivers at your disposal, and you're only going to survey 1,000? Weird, but excuse me. But I digress. 1,002 U.S. adults last month showed 64% of Americans adapted their driving or lifestyle habits in response to high fuel prices. Of these, 88% said they drove less, 74% said they combined errands, while more than half reduced shopping or restaurant visits. Many Americans have also postponed taking a vacation this year, according to that survey. Slowing demand on the weaker global market drove average gas prices in the U.S. lower for 41 straight days, including the single biggest weekly drop in almost 14 years, but at $4.355 a gallon on average. Prices still are 30% higher than they were a year ago. So we're talking a year ago, so we're talking August 2021. What was happening during August 2021? You telling me that even with the massive lowering of COVID restrictions, and I think overall in general the American public just kind of being over the entire thing, people are going out to continue their lives and so on and so forth, but they're not. You're telling me that today's level of driving is that much less or greater or equal to what it was a year ago when COVID insanity was damn near at the height of things. I have a hard time managing that on balance in my head. I don't understand how people can say that right now, because I think right now there are more than everybody else, for the most part in society, they're going out to restaurants again. They're doing the things within their capabilities due to inflation, with how much money they have. Everything is more expensive, so your dollar is worth less than it ever has been before. So people are doing what they can, taking different trips, smaller trips. That is something we've seen too, taking little weekend trip vacations versus taking a week or two off from work and going out and doing the whole shebang. Or they're doing that after trying to save up over the last 2 years when they weren't able to go out and do these vacations themselves. So it's a good thing that we see the price of gas dropping at this point, but it's not a sign that inflation is getting better. The oil market itself and the fuel market is one of those things that is a heavy weight on average when the Fed and the federal government calculates the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, because it is one of the most, I want to say expensive, but it's one of the largest chunks of money the American people put into the economy, because it drives everything. Fuel delivers your groceries. It makes the trains run on time. It makes commerce possible in our modern era. We have a huge boom in the e-commerce world and people working remotely and stuff like that. But the vast majority of people still have to drive to work. They still have to drive to the grocery store. They still have to drive to their restaurants. They still have to drive up to go see their friends and their family. I mean, all of this thing is all still, it's such a huge chunk when you're putting it on balance with the CPI. So other than that, I'm not an economist, so I don't want to pontificate too highly on it, but a drop in gas prices is not a sign that inflation is getting better, particularly when we start talking about the additional spending that was just done, as we'll get later on in the segment. The next thing I wanted to bring up as it pertains to inflation, where did my mouse go? I lost my mouse, 2 screens. The Fed, after the last Fed's meeting, the Federal Reserve is still, as ING puts it, Federal Reserve minutes, higher. Their concern is higher, but not too high. Inflation is higher, but it's not too high. I don't know what these people really think about when they're talking about what is too high inflation and what is not. I mean, it's these people, the Federal Reserve. I'm not going to get started on my disdain for these people, but these are the people that control the flow of money everywhere throughout our entire economy. Let me get caught up on the chat here before we dive into this one. I miss the days when Trump just flat out told us we were staying there because we love the oil. Hey, Bilbo, that was real deal, bro. Say what you want about T-Dog Millionaire, but if he had something to say, silence was a lie. He was just going to say it. We need to audit the Federal Reserve immediately. I disagree with you entirely, Bilbo Swaggins. I don't think we should audit the Federal Reserve. I think we should completely not only disband the Federal Reserve and go back to some form of a hard currency control like gold or something like that. But no, I'm not into auditing the Federal Reserve. It does not deserve to exist anymore. The evil that these people have done to the American people and on balance the entire world is so terrible. They just need to be gone. We just need to wipe that building right there. I don't know. Let's make it a new prison so we could throw all the politicians in it. That would be cool. So anyways, after the last meeting of the Fed board, they continued to raise rates as was reported. I think they raised another 0.75 basis points or something like that, which is a 0.75%. Make the dollar worth something again. Donovan, shout out in the chat. Thanks for stopping by, buddy. I hope you are starting to feel good. But according to the minutes, they are still looking at doing another rate hike when they meet again, I believe in September. Another probably 50 basis points and then maybe another 25 in December. But we will see how that goes. The Fed obviously is concerned about raising rates too high, which it's hard to explain. I'm probably not the best person to try and explain this, but if you raise interest rates enough, that means that when you take out loans, when people take up more loans and stuff like that, that money becomes more expensive over time. And so there's less credit given because it's more expensive to have, and that helps lower inflation because there's less money being put out there and so on and so forth. But the concern, they say, which I think is completely unwarranted anymore, is that if they were to raise interest rates too high, it would trigger a recession. But if there's one thing that we've learned over the last couple of months is that recession, like anything else, is just kind of whatever you want it to be. Recession isn't even a real thing anymore. It's just it's something that a group of experts, they all meet together and they look over the last couple of years of financials and say, oh yeah, that was a recession. It's no longer 2 straight quarters of negative growth in the overall American economy. That's just out the window now. So I don't know. They don't have anything to be afraid of. But 3 main takeaways and how it affects the market. I wanted to read through these real quick. The Fed thinks that the real rates are still too low, talking about their setting of interest rate percentages, even as they deem the nominal Fed funds rate as being now at essentially a neutral level, which is interesting. Neutral, I feel like, would be 0, but that's okay. Ammunition, therefore, expectations for higher, I don't know who wrote this thing, higher nominal market rates, even though the impact reaction has been to test lower for rates and for the belly of the curve to be richened. So they're still concerned essentially about raising rates too high, and they think right now they are too high, but they're not too high. They're neutral levels. We don't want to kickstart this thing into recession if we don't want. The Fed seems to be all over the place when assessing where financial conditions are. Fact check true. Janet Yellen has the former Fed chair, and then Jerome Powell, the current Fed chair. They've both been in front of Congress over the last month and have said that they had made mistakes. They didn't see the signs, blah, blah, blah. They all suck at their job. I don't understand why they're still in their jobs, especially Secretary Yellen, who is a politically appointee to the Treasury. She doesn't need to have a job. All Joe Biden's got to do is say, you suck at your job, you're fired. Although he should probably do that with a lot of people. Next, the Fed seems happy with the function of the reserve repo window, at which there is a 2.3% rate on offer. So this is the rate that the Fed is selling our money, essentially in bonds and debts and things like that. They also note that the doubling in the balance sheet roll-off volumes in the months ahead should ease the usage on the facility. We are currently beginning to see this, as the usage seems to have placated, albeit from struggling higher levels. So yeah, there you go. The Fed talking nonsense. They're going to raise rates again and hopefully not trigger a worse recession than I'm pretty sure everybody in America can identify that we're already in. About to head off another nap. Had to stop by. Keep killing it. Stay free. I will see you all next episode. Thanks for stopping by, my G. I hope you are feeling better. So, a little update on inflation. There you go. Inflation is still kicking. It is still high. Gas prices are lower because people are driving less, because it's still expensive as hell. Now, the Inflation Reduction Act, unfortunately, was signed into law this past week, which, as we will explain as we go further, has nothing to do with inflation, lowering inflation. If anything, it literally just is going to make it worse. So, CBS News reports President Biden signed the Inflation Reduction Act into law at the White House on Tuesday, finalizing a signature piece of legislation aimed at fighting climate change, lowering health costs, and raising taxes on corporations just before the midterm elections. So right there, Inflation Reduction Act doesn't affect inflation. It fights climate change, lowers healthcare costs, and raises taxes. Cool. I'm so glad we're calling it the Inflation Reduction Act. The House and Senate passed the bill along party lines last week, a.k.a. very little to no Republicans voted for it, after Democratic Senator Joe Manchin and Senate Majority Leader Chuckie Schumer struck a deal after many months of negotiations. Both senators were on hand for Tuesday's signing ceremony. Quote, "Let me say this from the start. With this law, the American people won and special interests lost," Mr. Biden told the crowd assembled at the White House. The president had two quiet cabinet members of Congress, and staff in the audience as they continue to cheer and clap well after he took the lectern, because he's so popular. Nobody can hold back. It's just they have to just outpour this love and elation towards this man who is not winning for the American people and is definitely giving special interests a lot of money in this bill. Particularly Joe Manchin, that deal that they mentioned, Joe Manchin and Chuck Schumer, it had to do with getting some fossil fuel deals done down in West Virginia, where Joe Manchin is the senator, and so that is very important to him. And so once him and Chucky Schumer kind of made that deal, he decided to sign on to the rest of it, because I guess Joe Manchin says the rest of the country, as long as I can get what I want in West Virginia, I don't really care what else is happening. Let's continue on here. The bill passage was many months in the making and at times appeared unlikely with the 50-50 Senate and midterm elections fast approaching. It accomplishes long-held democratic goals on lowering prescription drug costs, investing in transitions to clean energy, and reforming the nation's tax code. It also massively boosts the nation's tax collectors. We'll get into that a little bit further. Quote, "I was one of the few truly historic days in the 30 years I have spent in Congress," House Democratic Whip Jim Clyburn said, alongside Biden praising the president's legislative accomplishments. Senator Chuck Schumer said the law came amid, quote, "one of the most productive stretches in Senate history, in which Democrats passed gun control, expanded care for veterans exposed to burn pits, and gave themselves a bunch of massive spending along with that is totally discretionary, and provided billions of dollars in subsidies to boost U.S. production of semiconductors." Schumer, too, praised the president for steering the Inflation Reduction Act across the line. Quote, "I am confident this bill will endure as one of the greatest legislative feats in decades," Schumer said, adding that it was the most important bill we have passed in a long time. It gave a lot of money to a lot of people, and they're going to go ahead and detail some of the bullshit that was supposedly where all this money's going. But I got it right here. The Inflation Reduction Act of 2022. The Inflation Reduction Act 2022 will make a historic down payment on deficit reduction to fight inflation. Yeah, that's how you do that. Invest in domestic energy production and manufacturing and reduce carbon emissions by roughly 40% by by 2030. The bill will also finally allow Medicare to negotiate for prescription drug prices and extend the Expanded Affordable Care Act program for 3 years through 2025. Additionally, the agreement calls for comprehensive permitting reform legislation to be passed before the end of the fiscal year. Permitting reform is essentially to unlock domestic energy and transmission projects, which will lower costs for consumers and help us meet our long-term emissions goals. So the top line estimates. This is the real meat and potatoes. So we have a 15% corporate minimum tax, which is estimated $222 billion. That's how they're paying for this thing, by raising corporate taxes to a minimum of 15%. Which, if you know anything about the leaders of giant corporations, they will find a way to pay as little of that as possible. Prescription drug pricing reform. Apparently, $265 billion of that is going to that. This is my favorite one, the Irs Tax Enforcement. So this is what you've seen, the rhetoric online. You've seen the 56,000, 57,000 new IRS agents, so on and so forth. I highly doubt that's actually what it's going to be. But there's $124 billion going to the IRS. And I've seen stories about big modernization updates. And yes, Bilbo, all the corporate tax will do is raise consumer prices. Yeah, because that's how businesses work. And anybody with two eyes anybody that knows anything about basic economics can understand that. If you raise taxes on businesses, The person that will feel that is the consumer on the bottom end. That is how that works, especially at a corporate level where they have a legal fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders to make them fucking money. This is what drives me nuts about this. It's a nonsensical way to just put us deeper in the hole to spend more money that we will never get a return on. This is insane. Conveniently timed for midterms. There's no convenience behind it. This was strategically done right before midterms because it sounds good to their base when they want it. But the IRS tax, they're getting $124 billion from tax enforcement, supposedly. So the vast amount of money that they're going to be boosting at the IRS will supposedly just bring in more money somehow. They're going to their point of view on it is they're going to be going after those cheating millionaires and billionaires that aren't paying their fair share. And nobody that makes, no family or small business that makes less than $400,000 a year will be targeted by the IRS. Bullshit. There's absolutely no way that this is going to do anything except for affect the everyday normal working American who will simply just get a additional bill after doing their taxes from the IRS that says, oh, hey, actually you owe us this much money. Or, hey, instead of the $1,600 in a rebate that you're going to get $25. Or actually you owe us another $125. And people are just going to pay that. They're going to extort all this extra money from the American people. And this is criminal. Taxation is theft, and I think we all know this. The IRS has been spending over $600K a year on ammunition for a few years now. Yeah, they got to stock up for when a small business owner, because he can't afford a giant high-priced tax attorney and an entire accounting firm to do his taxes, when there's $150 missing, they can cart you off in chains, like the videos we've been watching on Twitter and social media go around for the last couple of weeks. This wonderful college training program that they have for the IRS, where all these fat, overweight people that are coming in their big old vests and they're holding fake guns and it's just disgusting. But yes, this is going to come down to you and me. They're going to come after us because we don't have the money and the wherewithal to defend ourselves from the giant machine that is the IRS. They are coming for your money, and they're going to get it, or they're going to throw you in a cage, because that's what they do. And that's disgusting. The IRS should not exist, period. But carrying on with this lovely Inflation Act bill, 1% stock buyback fees. So every time now there's a piece of legislation in this giant omnibus bullshit package that will essentially add an additional tax to anybody that is buying back a stock. This is a thing that happens a lot in corporate environments, or even medium to large size companies. If you have some form of a dividend payment, or if you're in a profit sharing situation, a lot of times you can just buy more stock instead of getting a cash out, and that overall will just raise the more ownership you have in the company, and it'll become worth. It's a type of investment, but they're going to add an additional 1% fee. They want to add on to that because they probably can't call it a tax, but because they already tax everything else. The loss limitation extension, I'm not real familiar on that one. To me, it's basically just the tax code of America is so fucking complicated and complex for a reason. The reason it's not a simple thing that any normal person can understand is because they need to find legal ways to extort every penny out of your pocket, out of your business, out of your paycheck. And this is just more spending to that point. The investments that they're spending, energy security and climate change. This is the big one. It is almost $400 billion, $369 billion. And this is going to be in and I love how they do this. They do this in what they call tax benefits, or what's the word? I'm blanking on the word, but tax credits. There you go. So you go out and you buy yourself a brand new Tesla because you're a upper middle class. You're an upper middle class person who can afford a $75,000 new car plus your increased energy costs for maintaining that car. You're going to go out and do that, and you're going to get I believe it's $7,500 tax credit for a brand new, and then a $4,000 tax credit for a used, except for the fact that doesn't apply to Tesla. You can't do that. You have to buy one of the bullshit ones. You might be able to get away with that Revia, the electric truck, which I'm actually kind of a fan of. I don't want to hate on that thing, but yeah. So you can get a tax write-off essentially for spending more money, which is just obviously great for the environment. The Affordable Care Act extension. There's more to that energy security and climate change stuff, but it's basically just a giant giveaway to solar panel companies and wind farm companies and all the shit that has really no effect on anybody else in America except for the people that are already in those businesses. The Obama administration had tried just once back during his term, and the company went bankrupt anyways. So I have a feeling we're going to be doing the same exact thing here. Either that, or we're just going to be bankrolling China because they're the ones that generally make all of our solar panels anyways. So, and that kind of checks true when it comes to Biden's relationship with China anyways. So yeah, we'll see that, and obviously they're going to tout some of these things here towards the bottom. But the Affordable Care Act extension, it's another few-year extension into 2025, which they say lowers people's overall buy-in into the ACA. They say on average will save them approximately $800 a year, which I don't know if you could do the math, but you divide that by 12 per month. So let's just go ahead and do that real quick, because I'm not about to try to do that in my head while we're live. Divide. That saves you $66 a month. Man, that's really going to help you save on inflation. And that's only if you're a member of the ACA. If you participate in the Affordable Care Act marketplace, which is already insanely expensive. If you do not have employer-provided health care, if you don't have some kind of privatized healthcare system thing going on, you're spending for a generally healthy individual between like $500 to $800 a month on like the most basic bullshit package that doesn't give you any kind of true sense of financial safety if something was to happen to you, because you still have like a $5,000 to $8,000 deductible, which you're not going to be able to pay anyways, because who the hell can? People can't afford $1,000 or $500 emergency right now if something happened like that. It's nonsensical. But yeah, so congratulations. They saved those people that are enrolled in the ACA approximately $66 a month. That's awesome. So let's see. They tout a couple of the individual things here. The expansion of Medicaid benefits, free vaccines, 2023. That's what's up, I guess. $35 a month insulin, and caps out-of-pocket drug costs to an estimated $4,000 or less in 2024, and settling at $2,000 in 2025. I got a real problem with how Medicare is run and what Medicare is as a institution, because it is an institution. It's basically a government subsidized form of health insurance, we'll put it that way, that is totally run by the U.S. government. And when they get involved in the markets, they obviously have more money than anybody else to spend in that market. And so just by participating in that market alone, they're already skyrocketing the price for everyone else that isn't involved with that. And because they are the government, they always have really deep pockets. These companies charge them insane prices. And yeah, if Medicaid is allowed to, or if Medicare is allowed to negotiate their own prices, all that really means is that instead of, say, being $1,000 for a drug, they might get it down to $900, when if it was a total free market, it might cost $50. Like, you just take a look at any kind of name brand drug compared to anything that's generic. I mean, it is 1,000 times less in cost than anything else. Go down to Mexico. Your basic antibiotics and things like that. I mean, you go in and they're dirt cheap. They sell them right out of the pharmacy. That is true free market capitalism at play when it comes to the pharmaceutical industry. Lowers energy bills, cuts energy costs by $500 to $1,000 per year. I don't understand how. All you're doing is dumping a ton of money into systems that don't pay for themselves and don't create enough energy to even come close to paying for themselves. I mean, we see this in Washington State right now. We have, particularly in eastern Washington, if you're not familiar with the geography, there's a Cascade Mountain Range that separates essentially western Washington, eastern Washington. Eastern Washington, about 3/4 of the state, and then you have basically the Pacific Northwest area, the Seattle, all the way down to Oregon. It's all the same type of environment. But over on the east side, they have massive wind farms, and you drive out there, and most of the time, they're never active. They just sit there. There's absolutely no way to make the energy and the cost that the cost to make the energy, there's no way to actually hit neutral or have that actually be a good energy investment. So I have zero concept how they're saying this is going to reduce your energy bill. It's just, they can just say whatever they want and it makes it okay. They make historic climate investments that reduce carbon emissions by 40% in 2030. I don't know how they can claim that unless there's some form of, cutting down on carbon creating industries right now, which obviously they didn't do because they just gave West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin access for more of that stuff. So that's great. Creates manufacturing jobs. More than $60 billion will be invested, will create millions of new domestic clean manufacturing jobs. Again, I call shenanigans because the government doesn't know how to create jobs except at the IRS. What this does is it subsidizes a bunch of private industry who they are anticipating will then have a giant boom to their industry. They will be forced to hire more people, creating millions of new clean domestic clean manufacturing jobs, which is just a bunch of bullshit. Invest in disadvantaged communities, clean up pollution, and taking steps to reducing environmental injustice with $60 billion for environmental justice. Try and sell that one to me. That makes sense. I don't put $60 billion for environmental justice. Cool. Clean up pollution, always a good idea. I'm always a huge fan of that. Let's see. Bilbo Swag. Oh, wifey's in the chat. What up, baby girl? Thanks for stopping by. Bilbo. With this bill, they are going to put windmills in the Gulf of Mexico. However, there is no windmill in existence that can withstand overseas. Fact check true. Windmills do not work at high speed. These wind turbines, if you will, they do not work at high speed. They're incredibly fragile. Not to mention they devastate the bird population. Not that birds are real. Conspiracy theory. But yeah, let's get back to this thing here. I don't understand this disadvantaged community. $60 billion for environmental justice. Somebody please explain to me what environmental justice is. But I mean, if we're going to clean up some pollution, that sounds cool. I don't like pollution. I like to spend time out in the woods, man. I'm into that. There's also only 13 ships in the world that are able to move the blades for those windmills and that are owned by foreign countries. Yeah, I've heard that before, Bilbo. That's wild. That doesn't surprise me because we don't believe in making anything in America. We basically made it all illegal for most industry to be here. So it doesn't surprise me that it's probably China or probably one of the Scandinavian countries. They do a lot of like the most giant oil tanking ships all over the world. They all come from like, Rotterdam and some of those Norwegian countries like that. If I remember correctly, when I wrote my paper against windmills, that was a huge thing. A lot of birds get affected by those things. So much for environmental justice. Yeah, I don't. Environmental justice, yeah. That's a massive injustice to the birds, man. And we got a bird problem already. I went down this bird rabbit hole once and it got really unhealthy. I found out that there's like over 1 billion birds per year die just by flying into windows. I'm like, that's too many birds, man. That's not real. Turns out there's a hell of a lot more birds than 1 billion birds in the world. So yeah, over 1 billion birds die a year just by flying into windows, and that's crazy. Oh. So we get back into the tax stuff here. Closes tax loopholes used by the wealthy, a 50% corporate tax and a 1% fee on stock buybacks, and enhanced IRS enforcement. Protects families and small businesses making $400,000 or less. Yeah, that's not going to happen. The IRS is going to come screw you out of more money. That's exactly what's going to happen. And if anybody tells you otherwise, they're lying to you. Because if there's one thing the IRS does not want to do, it's get involved in insanely expensive, long, drawn-out legal battles with people that have money enough to hire the most expensive lawyers and the most expensive tax firms to fight against them. Why would they do that? They're going to come after the people that can't defend themselves, like you and me. They're just going to send you another bill in the mail and you're going to pay it. And if you can't pay it, you're going to have to go broke trying to defend yourself, or I don't know how that whole thing works. I don't know if there's payment programs and stuff the IRS plans for people so they can just milk you out of money from your paycheck for the rest of your life. I don't know. But either way, they're lying and it's coming right to you. Next on the agenda, the IRS just got an $80 billion beef up. A bigger goal going after rich tax dodgers. Yeah, like my ass. But I had to bring this up because it's an NPR article, which, means that they're very, very friendly to the regime, and they obviously need to spread their message far and wide. The IRS is about to get a big infusion of cash as part of the massive climate and health care bill. They don't even call it an Inflation Reduction Act in the NPR article. As soon as it was passed, we're like, all right, let's just call this thing what it is. It's inflation, or it's climate, and it's healthcare, and it's also we're coming after the rich people that don't pay their fair share in taxes. So, sorry, I digress. As part of the massive climate and healthcare bill passed by the House on Friday, the tax collections agency is set to receive $80 billion over the next decade. Some of the money will go to update decades-old computer systems at the IRS. I have heard stories, actually, as an aside, from kind of insiders that a lot of these computers and stuff aren't even networked together. So they can't even do something as simple as having like a Microsoft Teams chat or a Slack channel or something like that. It all has to be done via like old school email, or heaven forbid somebody calls somebody else on their extension. And some is for improving customer service, including a taxpayer phone line where 9 out of 10 calls go unanswered. Yes. If you were one of those people that had problems getting your stimmies, you ran into that problem where you just couldn't get a hold of somebody even after 3 hours on hold. Most of the money, though, is for stepped up enforcement to help the IRS collect more of the estimated $600 billion in taxes that go unpaid every year, which much of it owned by rich people who underreport their income. So again, this is how you know this is a lie, because not only do they have to prove that these people underreported their income, they then have to fight them in court to make that legally the case, and then they can go after them after some form of settlement to reduce the overall amount that they owe. Quote, by beefing up the IRS capacity to go after wealthy tax cheats, we're going to be able to collect at least $400 billion. So right there, they're already writing off $200 billion of this over the course of the next 10 years, and I suspect substantially more, says Natasha Sarin, a counselor for tax policy and implementation at the Treasury Department. But there's a bitter opposition from Republicans and everyday Americans who despise the IRS. If there is one institution out there every single American can get behind getting rid of, it's the fucking IRS. Nobody likes the IRS except for people who work for the IRS. The IRS, or don't understand how it works and have never been subject to their ire before. The IRS funding passed Congress along strict party lines, aka Republicans barely voted for it, like the rest of the Inflation Reduction Act. Quote, imagine IRS agents descending upon America like a swarm of locusts, Senator Ted Cruz of Texas warned in an interview with Fox Business. And by the way, these IRS agents aren't there to go after billionaires. They're going to come after you. They're there to go after your small business. They're there to go after your family. Fact check true. I hate to give it to old Teddy Cruz, but he ain't wrong on that one. Both Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen and IRS Commissioner Charles Rettig, who was appointed by former President Trump, insist the additional enforcement efforts will target the wealthy, not middle-class taxpayers. So I'm sure they'll target a lot of people. Quote, let's be very clear about these resources are what these resources are and are not doing. Sarin said, these resources are not raising audits on any small business because they wouldn't waste the money. They'll just send you the bill. Or any household that makes under $400,000 a year. Again, they're not going to audit you. They're just going to send you the bill. And if you don't pay it, then there's the courts for that, and they don't have to spend that money in court because you're going to be doing most of the spending in court. The IRS had lacked financial resources. The money will help to reserve more than a decade of underfunding at the IRS. The agency enforcement ranks have shrunk by 30% since 2010. Thank God. Good. This is not a bad thing. Not every single government institution needs to exist. Like I said at the top show, I could recognize the reality of the government that we live in and the various institutions that all control us and have authority over how we live our lives. But this is not one that needs to exist. If anybody does any history into the existence of the IRS and the collection of taxes, you don't have to go back that far to realize this is all a very brand new thing, and this is very unnormal as it compares to American history. We don't need this, nor should we have it. The only reason it exists is so that these people can continue to steal money from us more efficiently and make sure Nancy Pelosi can keep making insider trades. So, enough of this. I don't want to talk about these people anymore. They're all a bunch of idiots. I'm tired of them. It's all bad. The Inflation Reduction Act is a lie and always has been since the start. So I guess in closing for this little part of the segment, there is nothing about the Inflation Reduction Act that actually has an effect on inflation that will do anything to lower it. We've gone over a couple of the small savings that everyday Americans that take advantage of certain government programs will be privy to. If you are in Medicaid or Medicare, you might have slightly reduced drug prices going into the future. If you're a member of the Affordable Care Act, you'll have, $66 less in premiums. That's okay. That's cool. So from $680 a month to $620 a month. That sounds great. And other than that, the big deal is a massive corporate buyout for the green industry and a massive boost in spending to the IRS. So really what we have here is a mass amount of spending, which, as anybody should know, we've covered it here before on the show, the more money the government spends, the higher inflation is going to be. This is not going to have a positive effect on society's perceived. It's a weird thing to say because positive and negative goes up and down. This is going to make inflation go up. Period. That's it. That's the long and short of it. Inflation is not going to be dampened at all by this ridiculous facade of a bill. It's just climate spending and boosting government spending. Done. So now let's go ahead and talk about Ukraine. Because keeping with our theme of spend, we're going to take a look at kind of some pushback that was given by the president of Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelensky. He had responded in an interview with, I believe, Piers Morgan. Did an interview with him and his wife, but generally has been responding that Americans being unhappy with the continued amount of financial support to Ukraine. He had some things to say about that. So this is an article from Newsweek, which isn't generally a very reliable source anymore, but they do have nice quotes from him, so I'm just going to go ahead and ride with those. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said Americans balked at the cost of U.S. support for Kyiv's fight against Russian aggression. Should keep in mind, quote, we are fighting for absolutely communal values. I mean, we are fighting for the same values that you would be fighting for. Essentially, by funding us, we're fighting for you. In an interview with journalist and broadcaster Piers Morgan, Zelensky was asked whether he was worried that Americans might be concerned at the amount Washington was spending in its military support for Kyiv's forces. In June, inflation over the previous 12 months hit 9.1. We discussed that earlier, its highest level since 1981. In May, President Joe Biden signed a $40 billion support packages from Ukraine and U.S. supply of M1842 high mobility artillery rocket systems, or the HERMS, has made a difference on the battlefield against Ukraine. So long and short of this story here is Zelensky's pushing back against the amount of Americans that are pushing back against the spending going on in Ukraine. It seems like every other week, Joe Biden is signing another piece of legislation that is sending more money to Ukraine. So I happen to find this nifty little document here that details some of the actual spending in Ukraine. All the security assistance that's going to this is from the Congressional Research Service. And this breaks down by the numbers what we've been sending to them for the entire fiscal year. So this is going back before the Russian invasion in February. So we have, over the last year, since last August, we have sent them $6.3 billion worth of assistance in one way or another. Just in August alone, almost over $500 million, $550 million. July, $175 million. $575 million in total for July. Even more than that. Good Lord. So we sent them money in July 3 different times, one for $50 million, $400 million, and $175 million. June, we sent them 3 times, $700 million, $350 million, $450 million. May, twice. That was it. That was a low month for us, $150 million and $100 million. Let's take a look. February, sent them $350 million. March, $200 million. March 16th, $800 million. Oh my gosh. So you might ask, how are we spending this $6.3 billion? Well, they happen to have a little breakdown of what it was that they sent them. We have 2 National Advanced Surface-to-Air Missile Systems, 16 high-mobility artillery rocket systems, those HERMS, and ammunition, over 1,400 Stinger anti-aircraft systems, over 6,500 Javelin anti-air systems, and over 20,000 other anti-armor systems, 700 plus Phoenix Ghost tactical unmanned aerial, what is the UAS? They're drones. The system, unmanned aerial system, that might be it. But yeah, 2 different kinds. Sent them over 700, the Ghost Phoenix Tactical and the Switchblade Tactical. 126 155 millimeter howitzers with almost 500,000 artillery rounds, 20 Mi-17 helicopters, which I think are essentially Russian helicopters, I'm pretty sure. Hundreds of armored Humvee vehicles, 200 M113 armored personnel carriers. So those are like little boxy looking tanks. We have over 10,000 small arms and 59 million rounds of ammunition, laser-guided rocket systems, and other essential non-lethal equipment, including communications and intelligence equipment. Woo! Again, inflation much? Now, this is done on a little bit different tilt than our standard spending. Any kind of money that we send them, any kind of goods that we send them, are done under what's called the Lend-Lease program, which means the minute we do that, we are financially invested in the future of the outcome, because what that means is essentially these are all loans that we are giving them in one way or another. Even if we're just sending them weapons and things like that made in America, we're just shipping it to them, all that cost, Raytheon still gets paid. Boeing still gets paid. All these people still get paid. The government takes on the debt in agreements with the Ukrainians that will be paid back. So by that effect, we got $6.3 billion invested in the positive outcome of Ukraine still existing on the back end of this war. I don't know what amount in dollars that would require us to ensure that they win. But we'll put it this way. If Russia was to have somehow marched right into Kyiv and taken over the entire country, we were not getting that money back because Ukraine as a sovereign nation doesn't exist anymore. So yeah, there you go. There's a nice little tidbit of more spending. This will do nothing for inflation but make it worse for us everyday Americans. And yeah, that just seems to be the tact of the current regime, is if there's a problem, let's throw money at it, and then the American people in our voting base will love us for it. And they're too stupid to realize that for every dollar we spend, for every extra dollar we create out there, it will devalue their dollar more and more and more. So with that, I am going to bring this segment to a close and take a little break skis. But before I do that, I wanted to do something a little different here. I wanted to bring on what I call a palate cleanser. And so this is a 40-second video from the great and powerful Dave Portnoy, who is a fantastic Twitter follow for all of his hot takes, for all of his silly videos and everything. You should make sure to follow him. But I'm going to read this first part of the tweet because it happens really quick, so it's really hard to read it in time to watch the video. But he shows a tweet from ABC first that says, police say a homeless man in Florida with no arms has been arrested for stabbing a tourist with scissors using his feet. And then they show a picture of him. And on that note, I will roll the video and then we'll go into our first break.
Looking style looks pretty good right there. Cut it in fours, did a little drizz on it.
And don't forget to give it to a crack addict. That's all we got on the beach, crack addict.
How's he pulling that? How's he pulling that? Is it hooked? Listen, I rarely get left speechless. I was left speechless by that guy.
Oh, thank you so much, Dave Portnoy. You are a man. The man, the legend himself. Thank you, everybody. Isle Walks, I am sorry you just got here, but we are going to be taking a quick break before we jump into the next segment. I will be back, everybody, in just a couple minutes, and we'll dive into the next segment of, what do we call this? The powers that be. We'll see you then.
We're back to Salt for the Streets podcast. Social and political commentary. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? Salt of the streets. Another fantastic episode. Everyday Normal Person's Podcast. Salt of the streets. Upper left or the upper left? Just upper left. Welcome to the salt of the streets, coming at you every week with this food for thought. Hope you ready to eat. With everything going on in this nation, we need some information, and that's why salt need to be stationed in your rotation. With real talking, real topics, real people, real problems. Think we need some help to solve them, and leave it up to Colin and Donovan, cause that's what's that? Oh, let's get ready. We're back to Salt of the Streets podcast. Social and political commentary. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? That's always and forever. That's right. Salt of the Streets. Another fantastic episode. Everyday Normal Person's Podcast. Salt of the Streets. Upper left or the upper left? Just upper left. Welcome to the salt of the streets, coming at you every week with this food for thought. Hope you ready to eat. With everything going on in this nation, we need some information, and that's why salt need to be stationed in your rotation. With real talking, real topics, real people, real problems. Think we need some help to solve them, and leave it up to Colin and Donovan, cause that's what's that? Oh, let's get ready. We're back to Salt of the Streets podcast. Social and political commentary. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? That's always and forever. That's right. Salt of the Streets. Another fantastic episode. Everyday Normal Person's Podcast. Salt of the Streets. Upper left or the upper left? Just upper left. Welcome to the salt of the streets, coming at you every week with this food for thought. Hope you ready to eat. With everything going on in this nation, we need some information, and that's why salt need to be stationed in your rotation. With real talking, real topics, real people, real problems. Think we need some help to solve them, and leave it up to Colin and Donovan, cause that's what's that? Oh, let's get ready. We're back to Salt of the Streets podcast. Social and political commentary. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? That's always and forever. That's right. Salt of the Streets. Another fantastic episode. Everyday Normal Person's Podcast. Salt of the Streets. Upper left or the upper left? Just upper left. Welcome to the salt of the streets, coming at you every week with this food for thought. Hope you ready to eat. With everything going on in this nation, we need some information, and that's why salt need to be stationed in your rotation. With real talking, real topics, real people, real problems. Think we need some help to solve them, and leave it up to Colin and Donovan, cause that's what's that? Oh, let's get ready. We're back to Salt of the Streets podcast. Social and political commentary. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? That's always and forever. That's right. Salt of the Streets. Another fantastic episode. Everyday Normal Person's Podcast. Salt of the Streets. Upper left or the upper left? Just upper left. Welcome to the salt of the streets, coming at you every week with this food for thought. Hope you ready to eat. With everything why salt need to be stationed in your rotation. With real talking, real topics, real people, real problems. Think we need some help to solve them, and leave it up to Colin and Donovan. Cause that's what's that? Oh, let's get ready.
All right, everybody. Welcome back once again to Salt the Streets podcast. This is segment 2 today. The powers that be, if you will. Welcome, everybody that's in the chat. Zeke, Bilbo, Io, Wax. If Lexi Kaio's still in there, what's up, baby girl? Salt of the street, the coffin where I sleep, the coffee that I drink. Hey, man. That works for me, especially if you're drinking coffee. You say you never drink coffee, and so you're totally wired. Are you drinking black coffee right now? Because that's the only way I drink it these days. But yeah, welcome back, everybody. This is going to be part 2 of our little solo show we got going on today, because we are missing the Nero of Neoprene, the original Salt of the Street himself. Donovan is actually taking a nap right now. He was with us earlier in part 1. He stopped by for a little while, but he is out sick today, down hard with a migraine. And so as a father of 2, I was telling him I'm glad that it sucks that he has to get sick and have a migraine, but I'm glad he's able to actually get some sleep, because as a new father of 2, I'm sure that is in seriously short supply, and he definitely deserves it and definitely needs it. Black coffee with a touch of goat's milk. Oh, dude. Goat's milk in coffee? Interesting. That's interesting, Bilbo. That's interesting. Black coffee with a touch of goat's milk. I don't know. Like, I like goat cheese. I don't think I've ever had goat's milk. I am drinking the ones in the little cups. It's dark, yes. Take it. It's like a little Keurig cup. That is awesome. Jeez, this is so funny. That's great. So today in this segment, we're going to be talking about the powers that be. We're going to be talking specifically about the raid on former President Trump's Mar-a-Lago property, and of course everything that comes with that. We'll get up to speed with essentially where the best we can divine is the latest that we're in, because the reporting on this has been atrocious, and the entire corporate media establishment's colors have been shown, because the misreporting around this is just astronomical. Everything about this thing has been disastrous and has really, really, really undermined the credibility of not just the FBI, but the entire Justice Department as a whole. And I think on that note, it is probably best to let the head of the Justice Department himself, U.S. Attorney General Merrick Garland, speak for himself as we open up today's segment with his statement around the raid on President Trump. So we'll start here.
Good afternoon. Since I became Attorney General, I have made clear that the Department of Justice will speak through its court filings and its work. Just now, the Justice Department has filed a motion in the Southern District of Florida to unseal a search warrant and property receipt relating to a court-approved search that the FBI conducted earlier this week. That search was of premises located in Florida belonging to the former president. The department did not make any public statements on the day of the search. The former president publicly confirmed the search that evening, as is his right. Copies of both the warrant and the FBI property receipt were provided on the day of the search to the former president's counsel, who was on site during the search. The search warrant was authorized by a federal court upon the required finding of probable cause. The property receipt is a document that federal law requires law enforcement agents to leave with the property owner. The department filed the motion to make public the warrant and receipt in light of the former president's public confirmation of the search, the surrounding circumstances, and the substantial public interest in this matter. Faithful adherence to the rule of law is the bedrock principle of the Justice Department and of our democracy. Upholding the rule of law means applying the law evenly, without fear or favor.
Unless it's against.
Under my watch,
I got a meme
that
for
is
this.
precisely what the Justice Department is doing. All Americans are entitled to the even-handed application of the law, to due process of the law, and to the presumption of innocence.
Oh, this is good.
Much of our work is by necessity conducted out of the public eye. We do that to protect the constitutional rights of all Americans and to protect the integrity of our investigations. Federal law, long-standing department rules, and our ethical obligations prevent me from providing further details as to the basis of the search at this time. There are,
Not for long,
however,
buddy.
certain points I want you to know. First,
Tell me.
I personally approved the decision to seek a search warrant in this matter. Second, the department does not take such a decision lightly.
Really?
Where possible, it is standard practice to seek less intrusive means as an alternative to a search and to narrowly scope any search that is undertaken. Third,
Narrowly.
let
Remember
me
that.
address recent unfounded attacks on the professionalism of the FBI and Justice Department agents and prosecutors. I will not stand by silently when their integrity is unfairly attacked.
Unfairly.
The men and women of the FBI and the
Got
Justice
something for you.
Department are dedicated, patriotic public servants. Every day, they protect the American people from violent crime, terrorism, and other threats to their safety while safeguarding our civil rights. They do so at great personal sacrifice and risk to themselves. I am honored to work alongside them. This is all I can say right now. More information will be made available in the appropriate way and at the appropriate time.
All right. That's enough of you, Merrick Garland. So, before we dive fully into this clown and his statements here, let me show you this. As Takarta, we apply the law evenly without fear or favor. I love this cartoon. It shows, if you're just listening, this is a cartoon of Merrick Garland standing there making his speech, looking all Merrick Garlandy, with, of course, Bill Clinton with a T-shirt that says Epstein Island. We have next to him his wonderful, beautiful wife, Hillary Clinton, in the T-shirt that says Russia hoax and her hat that says but her emails. Behind that, we got Paul Pelosi holding up a bottle of booze with his car keys, who was obviously being investigated, and I think he was just recently indicted, but for DUI. You got Nancy Pelosi next to him saying, ask me about my stock tips. And then, of course, you got a very strung out crack pipe in his mouth, Hunter Biden holding a pig without a shirt on, with what barely looks like a towel wrapped around his waist, with a piggy bank saying made in China, with a bunch of money coming out of it. And of course, the big guy himself with a little pin on his shoulder saying the big guy, President Joe Biden, right behind him in his nice little aviators, holding his son very, very, very lovingly. So that's where we're going to open up today. This was a big deal. First time in history, a former U.S. president was raided by the FBI. And we say raided because that's exactly what it was. People say search. People say whatever it was. I mean, the media came out right after in the beginning. Their language was that of raid, and then once they got some negative feedback on that, they decided to scale back the rhetoric a little bit because it was a little too on the nose, I think. But essentially, you heard it right there himself. Merrick Garland personally approved the search warrant, which we have and will go over today, for the actual raid on the former president's house over in Mar-a-Lago in Florida, conducted and carried out by the FBI in secret. This was never made public until the president himself made it public via social media. And I think it was on his own personal, his social media app, The Truth. But we'll see about that. After it was made public, immediately there was a good group of folks who went down there kind of protest on his behalf. Everybody's got their Trump flags and they're doing whatnot. And immediately the corporate press decided to start reporting on the fact that, quote, armed protesters were now protesting outside of Mar-a-Lago and making a really, really big deal about this, trying to make a really, really concerted effort to paint these people in a very negative fashion. I mean, I have my own thoughts about, flag waving Trump supporters, but hey, that's for a different aside. But the raid was carried out. What day was it? It was early, not this past week, but the week before. And again, the only reason we found out about the time was because, the president himself, former president, decided to disclose that and make it public at the time. And then next thing you know, every single media outlet was down there as quick as possible. Now, I don't want to go too far into the auspices of what their justification was, because I want to stick with the warrant itself and let that do the speaking for it. Any reporting until the warrant came out was completely nonsensical, and it was backed by a source close to the investigation, a unnamed source this and unnamed source that, somebody that familiar with the matter or familiar with the investigation. Absolutely disgraceful reporting, and it continued to evolve and change constantly because there was no true facts for these people to report other than the fact that it was happening. They had no real insider information. They couldn't get anything tangible, so they just, as the corporate press does, they just ran with it and just spun their own narrative as they went along. So we're going to start here, particularly because this segment is called The Powers That Be. So right now, one of the major powers that be is the Justice Department. The Department of Justice, as a executive branch institution itself, is at the head of this thing, carried out through their arms via the FBI. Now, as it comes to obtaining a search warrant on a former president, it has to be, an affidavit has to be submitted to a federal judge who then has to approve said warrant. The warrant then apparently needs to be approved all the way up to the Attorney General, because he said he personally signed off on it, which is of no surprise to me. But the judge in this case who signed off on the warrant, particularly as it pertains to the powers that be, is a very interesting man all to himself and has a very interesting story. So I think we're going to start there. Who is this judge that signed off on the search warrant to do a once-in-a-lifetime search raid on a former president's private residence? Now, this is great. The judge who approved the FBI Mar-a-Lago search represented clients linked to Jeffrey Epstein. That is the top line. That is the headline to the story by Politico here. And then it goes through. We'll read a little bit of it. Tallahassee, Florida. The federal magistrate judge who signed off on the warrant that allowed federal agents to search former President Trump's Florida residence once drew scrutiny for switching from his job as a federal prosecutor to working as a defense attorney on behalf of individuals connected to convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. The judge, known for his meticulous nature, is also well respected within the Palm Beach legal community and had once worked in the Justice Department's public integrity section. He had contributed to both Democrat and Republicans. So we've switched here. First paragraph saying, okay, so he had once worked as a defense attorney on behalf of the Epstein. And then it goes, he's a meticulous guy. Trump lawyer Christina Bobb told Politico that Magistrate Judge Bruce Reinhart signed off on the warrant that the agents removed about a dozen boxes of material from the property Bob was said to be present at the time the FBI conducted the search of Mar-a-Lago and Palm Beach. Reinhardt's decision to grant the FBI's warrant request to search Trump's resort has sparked a firestorm. A firestorm. Republicans pounce, who have decried what they call the, quote, weaponization of the Justice Department of Justice. But one local prosecutor described Reinhardt, who has been a magistrate judge since 2018, as a well-respected within the Palm Beach legal community. Reinhardt is married to civic court judge Carolyn Bell, a former federal prosecutor who was appointed to the bench by then Governor Rick Scott, a Republican who is now a senator. Quote, he's a former prosecutor and defense attorney, and he's always known for being meticulous, said Palm Beach County State Attorney David Ehrenberg, a Democrat who was elected state attorney, but who also once worked for Republican Attorney General Pam Bondi. He's not going to make a snap judgment. Ehrenberg added, Reinhardt could not be reached for comment. Magistrate judges are not appointed by the president, but instead are appointed by district judges. Their duties can include dealings with bond hearings, handling technical issues in civil cases, and signing off on whether to authorize a search warrant. So we're going to stop there, because the rest of this article basically just essentially goes into detail about how much respect you should have for this guy, how long a career he's had. He's a well-respected person. He's intelligent. He always does the right thing, blah, 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 blah. And then at the very, very, very end of the piece, state records show that over several elections, he donated to $4,000. Wait a minute. Where's my... Maybe I'm thinking of a different article. Oh, they got me on this one. Blacklist website. Here we go. Let's see. He worked as a federal prosecutor until January 1st, 2008, when a day later he became a defense attorney representing employees of Epstein, according to a 2018 story by the Miami Herald. According to the Herald, the employees, including pilots for Epstein, his scheduler, and a woman who had been described by some of Epstein's victims as his sex slave. I don't want to say we're talking about Ghislaine Maxwell, but it kind of sounds like we might be. Epstein committed suicide in Manhattan jail. He did not kill himself in 2019 while awaiting trial for sex trafficking. So, Judge Reinhardt, magistrate judge, not elected by the people, but appointed by a group of other judges in the district, was the one who signed off on the warrant. Now, that I think is really interesting in itself, because even Politico details the background of this judge, and particularly that of a magistrate judge, being involved in things that are, we'll say, infinitesimally smaller in when compared to, or in import as compared to signing off and approving a search warrant, first ever in history to raid a former president. A lot of times, what did it say? Involved in circuit court matters. Handling technical issues in civil cases, dealing with bond hearings. But of course, he can also authorize a search warrant for the former president of the United States, which I think is very, very interesting. So that right there already just kind of, the powers that be, man. The powers that be. This federal judge that signed off, I'm not going to tie any of these things together, obviously, but we're not trying to... You know, this segment isn't solely about the FBI's raid on Mar-a-Lago. It's more of a path to really the real subject matter here, which is these people that are in power. And these people that are in power are people that were a prosecuting attorney and then all of a sudden one day just decided to flip and become a defense attorney for the Epstein people. And now he's a judge that signs off on a warrant, which when you read the warrant sounds insane, of a former president of the United States. This guy signed off on this thing. He gave the legal go-ahead to the FBI to do this. So now let's go ahead and open up the warrant that was unsealed. Now this is great. So there's a bunch of legal stuff right at the beginning, blah, 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 search and seizure warrant. This is Southern District of Florida. You are commanded to carry out this warrant on or before August 19th. Attachment A, the premises to be searched, and then it gives the address, is further describes so they kind of describe the overall area to be searched. The location to be searched include the quote 45 office, all storage rooms, and all other rooms or areas within the premises used or available to use by F. POTUS. I don't even know how we're going to probably put that. Former President of the United States and his staff, in which boxes or documents could be stored, including all structures or buildings on the estate. It does not include areas currently at the time of the search being occupied, rented by third parties, so on and so forth. It's a resort. They're not going to go break down, everybody else's place that lives there. Now, the real interesting part, this is what it is that they're actually looking for. Bilbo Swaggins, the party told you to reject the evidence of your eyes and ears. It was their final, most essential command. This is the first time I have seen a warrant. I'm excited for this. Boom. Heck yeah, buddy. We got a warrant for you. And this interesting. It's just a couple pages of paper. So, attachment B, property to be seized. All physical documents and records constituting evidence, contraband, fruits of crime, or other items illegally possessed in violations of U.S. Code 18793, 2000, blah, 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 all those codes, which we're not going to get into, including the following. A, any physical documents with classification markings, along with any container/boxes, including any other containers in which such documents are located, as well as any other containers, boxes that are collectively stored or found together with the aforementioned documents and containers/boxes. So anything that has a classification marker. B, information, including communications in any form regarding the retrieval, storage, or transmission of national defense information or classified material. C, any government and or presidential records created between January 20th, 2017 and January 20th, 2021, also known as the entirety of his presidency. If we recall Merrick Garland talking about limited and narrow in scope, how about just the entirety of his presidency? That works. My ass, limited and narrow. D, any evidence of the knowing alteration, destruction, or concealment of any government and or presidential records or any documents with classification markings. And then we have the receipt, the property receipt, as they say. This is what they took out, and should be noted, it's redacted. If you could see, there's a few boxes here, case numbers, who it's received by, and printed name, of course. But this is great. They have 33 items in total on the receipt, and they are, we'll name a couple of them for those of you that can't see or just listening. One of the documents, box labeled A14, box labeled A26, box labeled A whatever. Executive grant of clemency, R.E. Roger Jason Stone Jr., Info R.E., President of France, leather-bound box of documents, various classified TS SCI documents, potential presidential record, binders of photos, 2 of those, handwritten note, box labeled so-and-so, miscellaneous secret documents, miscellaneous top secret documents, more miscellaneous top secret documents, miscellaneous confidential documents, box labeled so-and-so, miscellaneous secret documents, confidential documents. So boxes and boxes and boxes of documents. That's what we got here. We got boxes of documents, some binders of photos, a handwritten note, of course, the grant of clemency for Roger Stone, and info regarding President of France. That one, that's intriguing. I want to know what that is. But yeah, that's what we got going on here. That's what they found, along with the warrant. I mean, in total, you're talking 7 pages between warrant warrant and receipt. So the powers that be have decided to approve an Epstein defending judge backed by Merrick Garland, approved a search warrant for anything that had a classified marking for the entire of Trump's presidency in the search warrant. That sounds pretty narrow in scope to me. That sounds pretty great to me. The long and short of it is that's basically the best we've gotten at this point. There's really no way to know what's in those documents, what's in those boxes. What is really going to be giving us some more info on this is the possible unsealing of the affidavit, which is the document that is brought to the judge to ask him to approve the search warrant. It's the reasoning behind the search warrant. And that I have good news on, because normally those are not unsealed. But thanks to the Twitter world, we have, somebody's been following up on this case here. United States District Court, Southern District of Florida, case number so-and-so under Reinhardt, the sealed search warrant. This has to do, let's just read the thing here. This cause is before the court on motion to unseal the search warrant materials, including the probable cause affidavit. So that's the important part that we need. That were filed by the Meteor Interventors, so on and so forth. Today, I held a hearing on the motions. As I ruled from the bench at the conclusion of the hearing, I find that the present record, the government has not say that again. I find that on the present record, the government has not met its burden of showing that the entire affidavit should remain sealed. It is ordered that by noon Eastern Standard Time on Thursday, August 25th, so that is next week, ladies and gentlemen, next week, August 25th, the government shall file under seal its proposed redactions along with a legal memorandum setting forth the justification for the proposed redactions. That means that sometime next week we're going to have some more. We're actually going to have a little bit of info on this, and ideally we will have ourselves a little bit of info on the reasoning behind why it is that the FBI decided they needed to justify a raid on the president's private residence. There's been a lot of speculation about what it is that he has and why he's holding on to these different things and so on and so forth. And it will be a cherry-picked information. I seriously doubt at this point in time, Bilbo, that it'll be something that will, there won't be a smoking gun, as it were, as to indicting the FBI and the Justice Department for weaponization. But hopefully it'll be something. If there's, I don't know, Florida seems like a pretty decent place as far as the legal system goes. I don't know. It's also the same place that signed off on the warrant to begin with, so it's going to be a crapshoot. But at this point, any information that we can get out of this is going to be better than just allowing the corporate press to continue to run with it. The White House came out after this was happening and said they had no knowledge that this was going to happen. They had no idea. They heard about it on social media reports, and just like the rest of us did. They're just folks like us, man. You got to tell me that the President of the United States is not going to get a what's up from his AG that they're about to raid the former president, his predecessor, and most likely political contender in the upcoming election? You're going to tell me you're not going to tell the president about that? Because that seems pretty sus to me. That seems like if I was the president at that point, I'd be firing people because I'd be like, how are you not going to keep me informed? You work for me, dude. You work for the executive branch. I am the executive. How are you not going to give me a heads up that you're about to drop this on me like this? Unless, of course, he knew. But then again, he is also 1,000 years old and can barely string a sentence together. I would doubt that they would want to tell him anyways, because he would have no idea. Hopefully Ronnie D is able to do something. Ronnie D. Yeah, hopefully. We'll see. We'll see. That's the best we could do right now. We just kind of wait for something to happen. I don't know how much, because it's in the federal court system. I don't think Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, has much he could do necessarily. Maybe he can help put pressure on the FBI or something like that. Maybe he can put pressure on the FBI's field office there. I'm not sure. Unfortunately, the feds kind of have a reputation of just steamrolling over the states. It would be really nice if he did something as ballsy as just, expel the FBI out of a state. I'd imagine he could try to do that. That would be fun. I'd love to watch that try to go down. One downside I've realized of doing a solo show is very little time to drink beer. I brought 2 Oktoberfests with me today to get through the show, and I'm like not even down half a can right now. Oh, so yeah, that's where we're at, man. We're at the FBI. Director Christopher Wray, who was appointed by Trump, I should add. That's been a big thing the court press has tried to make a deal out of. I mean, anybody that's up in arms about this shouldn't be upset because this is a Trump-appointed FBI director. This is Christopher Wray we're talking about here. This is Trump's guy. Man, we'll get into some more further fuckery of the FBI here in a minute, but I just gotta say, man, if you weren't skeptical of, I don't want to call it the deep state because that term is so overused and so charged with other stuff, but if you're not skeptical of the power of the administrative state at this point, I don't know what's wrong with you, because you got to understand, like, people like Director of FBI Christopher Wray, he has some kind of power. I mean, he's got a lot of power, but at the end of the day, it's the FBI field offices. It's not the everyday agents, more or less. Maybe the middle management of the FBI, whose names you don't know, the ones that make the machine move, that push through search warrants. That conduct these raids, the people that conceptualize this stuff. I mean, that's insane to me. It's been nice, I will say, to see the kind of, though it might be hollow in a lot of fashions, but the general outpouring of disdain towards the FBI from the Republicans in office. A lot of messages of defund the FBI were floating around, which was, as an anarchist, I'm fully on board of. And anybody that believes in any kind of minarchist system, minimal, small government, anybody should be on board with that. Any way to limit the Fed's ability to get to you is a good thing. That's where we're at. I mean, I don't understand why anybody would not want that, unless, of course, you're somebody that fully believes that regardless of the means, the ends is justified. If you like what a powerhouse like the FBI does, then you want them around, because they have the unconstitutional ability to basically steamroll over even a former president's civil rights for like their actual natural rights. They could just go right over them. Why? Because of the FBI. They have the power to do it. And anybody that thinks that that's a good idea, I question your morals at that point. This is not a good thing to do. If there was a serious problem with this, we know for a fact that since the spring, the Trump world, if you will, has been involved with the the National Archives in trying to get back X amount of records and so on and so forth. They've been in legal battles. They've been in talks. Everything's been going. They've showed up. They've grabbed stuff. There was a story during the raid that the FBI broke open his safe and, broke the lock off a safe or something like that. And it was reported that the National Archive folks provided him the lock so that he could securely store whatever records these were. There's been a lot of argument and discussion about the process, legal and otherwise, of declassification when it comes to the executive, because there's only one person in the government that can set classification standards, and that is the president. And there is no legal or constitutional avenue to pursue the validity of classification or otherwise. There are people that essentially make the argument that as the lead executive, the president can just say, hey, this is unclassified, and it is thereby declassified. Some people argue that there are processes in place that, the president could do that, but then he needs to cycle that down. He needs to filter it down to the rest of the bureaucratic state that needs to do that, so that they can essentially put another stamp over top of the classified stamp that says, okay, this is declassified now. Then it's officially declassified, but there's no legal precedent for it. There's no constitutional precedent for it. I mean, there's nothing. So this is going to become a problem as this continues to go forward. Considering the FBI had a warrant to arrest any presidential information under his entire presidency that had any form of classification associated with it, this tells me something else. This tells me the FBI is trying to do something else. This is not exactly part of the... Yeah, we could tie it to it. Let's do that. The FBI, it appears at this point that the FBI is trying to find something that is illegal. It is very unclear at this point whether or not just by possession of classified documents, if the president has done anything illegal in that respect. There are ties to what they call the Espionage Act, which is a very broad law that can basically hem up anybody that the government wants to hem up for almost any reason whatsoever, and has been used in a lot of very ill-begotten cases to get certain problematic pieces of the chessboard off. Bilbo Spaggins says, back in the 1980s, a law was passed that a president can unclass any document up until his last day. Word. And then the problem is, like I said before, is how does that process go down? I don't think there needs to be a process. If the president himself can classify whatever he wants, he could declassify whatever he wants. He can get in there, declassify all the fucking Area 51 stuff. He could declassify all the alien stuff. He could declassify the 2X25 JFK stuff. There's no reason that they can't declassify that. There's zero reason why a sitting president cannot do that. That is his sole authority to do that. Period. I don't understand what we're talking about here. Unless, of course, you take the more logical path here that the FBI is trying to come after a private citizen. This is the full weight and power of the federal government's executive, law enforcement, and justice branch coming after a private citizen. For what? Over classified documents? Like what? Like what? You justify this to me in any way, please, right now. The only problem with it is there is no time frame for release. Yeah, that's true. And who knows? Who knows how that... There's been no... It's never been an issue until now. You know what I mean? There's... I think what you're talking about, the only problem is there's no time frame for release. You talk about like the release of classified information, like a declassification release. because on certain ones there are. Like with there's no definitive time. But like with the JFK stuff, those are all classified 2x25, which means that it is 2 times 25 years. So that means 50 years declassified. But the problem is when it comes up, when that time comes up, they can just say, no, that's still 2x25. It's still classified. We don't need to release it. We could, but we're not going to. And when it comes, like I said, to the executive, he's the executive, the person in the job at the time, the executive of the country, of the government, has all the power to do this. These are all his agencies, their agencies, his, hers, whatever. This doesn't make any sense to me unless you look at it from a prosecutorial standpoint. I mean, they are coming after them for a reason. I don't know what the reason is yet, other than it's getting close to midterms. Once midterms are done, he's going to announce. And it would be a hell of a lot worse if we did this once he was an official candidate. I mean, I don't get it. There was a report done that apparently Merrick Garland sat on the information. He thought about whether or not he should sign on to the warrant for weeks. He was going over it in his head, making sure it was the right thing to do. The October surprise is going to be wild this year. Yes, Bilbo. That's what I am. I feel like there was a guest on Timcast IRL, maybe last week or something like that. Her name Naomi Wolf, and she had made this point essentially that things are crazy now. They are literally the craziest they've ever been at this point. This is a once in a nation's history thing at this point, and things are just going to continue to get crazier as November comes. And if this is where the bar's at in August, October is going to be rough. October is going to be real rough. I'm not looking forward to what is going to happen in October. And also, I mean, it would also be very interesting if anything, is more for just informal how this giant machine works, to understand or establish some regularity around what it is a president could take with them when they leave. At one point, he was given the highest security clearance possible because he was the president. You can't not deprive the head executive of a security clearance if he's the one that authorizes ultimate security clearances. So it would make sense at that point that he obviously has the highest level of security clearance. He has the access to anything the government has in their possession, period. Why would you not be allowed to take certain things with you on the way out? Because you're going to maintain that clearance. You're always still going to have security with you, because that also follows you out the door. The proper methods of storage and safekeeping and so on and so forth. And as far as the government's security is concerned, wouldn't it be better to have a much more decentralized security network at that point? If all of your documents are in one spot, what happens if, a plane flies into the fucking White House, destroys the archives? Who knows? Would it be best to not have that in a decentralized manner all around? I mean, who's got tighter security than former presidents? I don't know, man. So let's dive into another bit of fuckery on the FBI's in the FBI's realm. And for this, we're going to look to our good friends over at Project Veritas. The FBI whistleblower leaks domestic terrorism symbols guide on, quote, militia violent extremists. This was great when it got rolled around the internet. And unfortunately, we got to talk to whoever's leaking these documents because they're very, very hard to read. It's a very blurry type of picture. And if you're just listening, I'm going to describe this. And what this is a FBI internal use only, unclassified, law enforcement sensitive document passed around to people at the FBI entitled Militia Violent Extremism. And they give a summary of what it is that they say that is, and I can't quite read it, but it's a list of symbols and references that are associated with militia violent extremism. Some of the symbols include two-way, boogaloo, which, you know, if you don't know what the boogaloo is, let's talk. But obviously, we'll talk on Signal. How about that? Electronical resistance symbol, which apparently is some kind of, you know, like an electric current resistance thing. This one was really got me. Anarcho-capitalism. The symbol for ANCAPs is on an internal FBI militia violent extremism flyer. Does that mean that ANCAPs are violent extremists? How about the warrior culture? It's pictures of like a Spartan helmet. I can't read the other one. Oh, that's the cannon. What is the story with that? It's, Timcast talks about it a lot. And then, of course, Black Flag, which is also just the standard anarchist symbol is a black flag. So not only are ANCAPs and anarchists, and what is that cannon flag? There's such a great story about it. I'll have to remember it another day, talk about another episode. But all those symbols now are considered symbols of militia violent extremism. You have commonly referenced historical imagery or quotes. The Gadsden flag, which I proudly have in the studio, which I don't think you could see at this point because there's a lot in the studio. The Gadsden flag, the Liberty Tree, Revolutionary War imagery, and of course the Betsy Ross flag. All those are commonly referenced historical imagery associated with militia violent extremism, according to the FBI. I don't think I even need to. What is so wrong with that? What's wrong with that is they represent the standing up against tyranny, the overthrow of an oppressive regime. I don't know how you could be more crystal clear here, man. If the FBI itself is telling you that these are symbols and references to militia violence extremism, that means one thing and one thing only. The FBI does not want you to have these. They consider you a violent extremist at that point. Common phrases and references, they have a list on here. I can't read them. See, even if I blow them up, they're too blurry. They're too blurry for me to read. Symbols of militia networks. Some MVEs, militia violent extremism, may self-identify with 3%ers. I can't read that one. Light something militia. The Oath Keepers, who are heavily involved in Jan 6. American Contingency. Mainstream militia nationwide. Mostly online activity. Low history of violence, they say. Actually, I highly encourage everybody to go watch. I don't remember what day it was. Must have been Wednesday or Thursday of last week. Episode of Timcast IRL has the founder of American Contingency on, and he describes exactly what it is. He's a former special ops guy. Did a lot of time in Afghanistan, Iraq, and a bunch of those things, and now kind of runs this loose association of various American militias and holds trainings on self-reliance and survival and homesteading, and very, very into individual freedoms. And he was a part of the group of guys run by Tim Kennedy that went back to Afghanistan as a private organization to help pull people out that Joe Biden left to die when he abandoned Afghanistan. I have lots and lots of feelings on that, but the guy he's a dude that does stuff, man. He's he's there, and he's a really nice, intelligent guy. He's a it was really funny. They talked about how he's mixed race, and so now this is basically the FBI being racist against his organization. That it's really important to discuss here too the concept of a militia. It is painted by the powers that be as nothing more than generally white supremacist-backed violent groups who look to overthrow the government, and they want to do terrorism and domestic terrorism and all this stuff, which is the furthest thing from the truth is when it comes to what a militia is. Militia is an associated group of like-minded citizens who believe in individual liberty and freedom, and they believe that Mike Glover, thank you Bilbo Swaggins, Mike Glover, I was blanking on the name, but who want to get together and essentially form what is essentially a club, which under the First Amendment and the Freedom of Association is our absolute right to do, and the government cannot infringe on that. Joseph, you made it late as usual. Hey, that's all right, buddy. We're doing something a little different here today anyways. Our good buddy, brother in arms, Donovan, is out sick today, so I'm flying solo, and we're talking about militia violent extremists right now, which is great, courtesy of Project Veritas. But yeah, a militia is nothing more than a group of people that decide as a community they want to get together and be able to train so that they can defend their communities and their neighbors from external threats. That's it. The militia was the only reason we have a country. That and the French, but we won't talk about them. Militias are necessary for the security of a state. It's in the Second Amendment, for God's sakes. The painting of militias as terrorists is the most disgusting authoritarian grab at power that I've seen in a very long time. And almost every other day, there's a new grab at power, which disgusts me. And this one is fundamentally disturbing because it eats away at the ability for the individual American to withstand the tyranny of the government, which the Constitution is literally designed to prevent. This is something, too, I'll just talk about this for a second. Michael Malice has talked a lot about this. When it comes to whether or not people are white-pilled or black-pilled about the future of the country and society as a whole, and whether basically white-pill being you're hopeful and black-pill being like, no, this is it, bro. This is bad. Society's going to crumble. It's all going to be over. He likes to say that he's white-pilled because none of these people that are in power are very impressive. They're all very, very unimpressive, right? But my pushback to this concept is, and why I'm black-pilled about this entire thing is, yes, individually, these people are very unimpressive. They are. But what is so impressive about them, because they've all been in office for decades, essentially. They've all been in the same circles for decades. What is most impressive about these people is that they've been able to build up this machine that is now capable, 100% capable of, if they wanted to, flipping into full tyranny mode and knocking in people's doors at any point in time. They do it on a very, very, very regular basis. They as individuals are not impressive, but the machine that they have built that guards them from the populace is insanely impressive to me. It is terrifying to behold, and if you come up against it, it is terrifying to try to withstand. It's not good. This is all really, really, really bad. The weaponization of the Department of Justice it did not happen when they raided Mar-a-Lago. It happened a long time ago when it was created. The FBI, when the FBI was created, that was a step too far. It gave the federal government law enforcement powers, which they are not dictated or mandated to have. They don't deserve to have any of it whatsoever. The states have legal authority within their own borders. Unless the FBI comes, well, if it's a federal crime, now the FBI gets to take care of it. Bullshit. The FBI, the federal government doesn't deserve, they're not remitted to have any of the power that they have now. Bilbo says, that is their ultimate goal, but they need to have the hive mind behind them. That's right. And the hive mind is the machine, man. Every one of these people that gets into power is absorbed into the machine. Every one of them, damn near. You could count on probably one hand how many people have been able to withstand the machine in at least some capacity. But a lot of people go in there with high hopes, and the next thing you know, they are absorbed. So it's not good. And now, how about this story as far as the powers that be here? Alex Berenson. Alex Berenson is somebody I don't remember if we talked about in the last episode or not, but he was banned on Twitter for spreading COVID misinformation and all that good stuff. Well, he has since gotten his account back, and on his Substack, he described what happened and why he got suspended from Twitter, and we'll just let him speak for himself here. His piece on his Substack, which I highly recommend everybody get up on Substack. They're amazing people that talk about amazing stuff there. So the White House privately demanded Twitter ban me months before the company did so. Biden administration officials asked Twitter to ban me because of my tweets questioning the COVID vaccines, even as company employees believed I had followed Twitter's rules, internal Twitter communications reveal. In a White House meeting in April 2021, 4 months before Twitter suspended my account, the company faced, quote, one really tough question about why Alex Berenson hasn't been kicked off of the platform, a Twitter employee wrote. The employee recounted the meeting discussing afterwards on Twitter's internal Slack messaging system. The message and others make clear that top federal officials targeting me specifically, potentially violating my basic First Amendment right to free speech. Fact check, true. The First Amendment does not apply to private companies like Twitter, but if the companies are acting on behalf of the federal government, they can become state actors that must follow free speech and debate, just as the government does. Previous efforts to file state action lawsuits against the government and social media companies for working together to ban users have failed. Courts have universally held that people who have been banned have not shown the specific demands for government officials that are necessary to support state action claims. Oh, but he's got the receipts this time, man. Here, if you're just listening, I'm going to show a couple screenshots that he got from going through discovery when he was suing Twitter over this. And it shows the private Slack channel, and they are redacted names of who it is. But here we go. Quote, how was White House? Crossing fingers emoji. Overall, pretty good. They had one really tough question about why Alex Berenson hasn't been kicked off from the platform. Otherwise, their questions were pointed but fair, and mercifully, we had answers. JW, any high-level takeaways from the meeting? Anything we should keep an eye out for? Thanks for clarifying, and yes, they really wanted to know about Alex Berenson. Andy Slavitt suggested they had seen data viz is like a visualization of data. It's like metadata and stuff like that, that had showed he was the epicenter of disinfo that radiated outwards to the persuadable public. So here we go. We have an aide to the President of the United States talking to Twitter about why they hadn't banned a private citizen off their platform. The powers that be are coming after individuals for exercising their freedom of speech because it questions their narrative. I mean, this was all around COVID. And as we know now, the COVID guidance has always been bullshit. The CDC Director Rochelle Walensky has recently come out and admitted fault for essentially the CDC being a giant clusterfuck during the entire pandemic, and vows that they're going to be better and so on and so forth. And really, they're just going to empower all these. They're going to have more power to do worse things. The CDC was the same organization. They decided, without any kind of legal precedent, they could just say you can't evict people. We're going to put in an eviction moratorium now. That's the Centers for Disease Control, ladies and gentlemen. The powers that be do not want you to have any control. They need all the power. All the power must be divulged to them, and they have to dictate how it is that you get to live your life the way they want you to. Them banning and getting rid of these voices only being more ears to listen. And that's, man, all I'm going to say is it is a good thing that we're in the era we're in. Because, yes, this stuff, we would not know this. We would not be able to have this discussion 20 years ago. Not even 20 years ago. Not even 10 years ago. The only reason we could do this because the technology exists at this point to see certain things. I think Donald Trump becoming president did have a lot to do with that. Not the technology part, but he helped, I think, break the brain of the hive mind for a little while. It saw him as a virus, an outsider, and it had to act to expel him, and continues to do that. And through that process, the public as a whole has been able to glean these things and see these things. There's a whole, I got a whole thing in here about Director Christopher Wray downplaying the evidence in Hunter Biden's laptop. There's a whole, I mean, you can pretty much anywhere you look these days find more and more examples of the government's ties to powerful private corporations. Homeowners still had to pay their mortgages. BlackRock was ready for that. Ready if they didn't. Amen. Amen, Joseph. That is absolutely right. The only people that didn't get to do that were like, and it really kind of fucked a lot of people up that certain states already had really powerful tenant-sided eviction laws. Washington State is very, very tenant-friendly. I mean, you could damn near live in somebody's rental property for over a year before they can legally kick you out. Like, it is wild. And that's without any of the COVID bullshit. But yeah, you best bet that if you are a homeowner and you didn't pay your mortgage, gone, goodbye, doesn't matter. Anything to remove any power from you, any generational wealth from you, gone. Gone, gone, gone. But if you're just a cog in the machine, either they don't care about you and you can just fall by the cracks, or we'll come down on the guy that's making money off of you. Man, oh man. I've been thinking a lot about fascism lately. I gotta tell you. What is fascism, right? What's fascism? The lefts have been calling us fascists for years. Fascism is an authoritarian form of government that is generally run by a dictator, but is not necessary. If you Google it, it'll say it's a right wing. It's an ultra right wing government, but it has nothing to do with right wing or not, depending on your definition of that. But it's an authoritarian government that has control over corporations, and generally speaking, also the means of production goes along with that too. But generally speaking, it has to be like Vichy style, like actually state-owned corporations. You know, the corporate, the state would need to actually own portions of the corporation, kind of like like Nazi Germany and fascist Italy and stuff like that. But particularly when it comes to like this Alex Berenson piece. Once the government holds sway over these companies, when all they have to do is ask them to do something for them, whether or not there'll be legal ramifications or not, they always have the threat of legislation and regulation behind them. Anytime the government sways a corporate entity like that, in my mind, like you said, that Alex Berenson is going to sue the White House for this misdeed. Because the White House, or because Twitter, via their involvement with the executive branch through the White House like that, became a state actor. When they're a state actor, are they any different than a fascistly controlled entity? No, not in my mind. So paint that any way you want, but maybe Antifa, it was onto something when they say America's a fascist country, because hot damn, I'm starting to believe it. Not in the way they think. But it's real hard not to see it anymore. It's real hard not to see it that way. When, every single social media outlet over the last, number of years been involved in discussions in front of Congress and hearings and threatened with regulation, blah, 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 unless they kind of do what they want to do. Maxine Waters will say it outright. If you guys if you guys don't do what we want to do, we'll do it for you. That's fascism. How is that not fascist? And when you got everybody from the Department of Justice all the way down to the peons at the FBI calling you an extremist for being a part of a militia, getting private citizens kicked off of social media. Like and how do I know that they actually believe this? Because you got people like this. I'm going to prompt this real quick. This is a clip from a show I highly recommend called Trigonometry, done by a couple of British blokes, and they were on an American tour and spoke with a bunch of American intellectuals, and they had a really good conversation with former member of the IDW, Sam Harris. And this is a 2-minute clip, so hang on for a minute, but it's going to be well worth it. But he, I think, perfectly embodies this problem we're talking about on an individual level.
I mean, Hunter Biden, at that point, Hunter Biden literally could have had the corpses of children in his basement. I would not have cared, right? It's like, there's nothing. First of all, it's Hunter Biden, right? It's not Joe Biden. But even if Joe Biden, whatever scope of Joe Biden's corruption is, like if we could just go down that rabbit hole endlessly and understand that he's getting kickbacks from Hunter Biden's deals in Ukraine or wherever else, right? Or China. It is infinitesimal compared to the corruption we know Trump is involved in. It's like a firefly to the sun, right? I mean, like there's just it doesn't even stack up against Trump University, right? Trump University as a story is worse than anything that could be in Hunter Biden's laptop, in my view, right? Now that doesn't answer the people who say it's still completely unfair to not have looked at the laptop in a timely way and to have shut down the New York Post's Twitter account. Like that's just a conspiracy. That's a left-wing conspiracy to deny the presidency to Donald Trump. Absolutely, it was. Absolutely, right? But I think it was warranted, right? And again, it's a coin toss as to whether or not
Sam, I'm sorry.
That particular piece.
I'm really sorry. I was the one that said we should move on, but you've just said something I really struggle with there, which is
the kids in the basement.
Fuck the kids in the basement. I'm interested in democracy. You're saying you are content with a left-wing conspiracy to prevent somebody being democratically re-elected as president.
Well, no, I'm content. Well, but the thing is, it's just not left-wing, right? So Liz Cheney is not left-wing, right? Liz Cheney is doing everything in her power.
You're content with a conspiracy to prevent somebody being democratically elected.
But there's nothing conspiracy. It's not. It was a conspiracy out in the open. But it doesn't matter if it was. It doesn't matter what part's conspiracy, what part's out in the open. I mean, I think it's like if people get together and talk about what should we do about this phenomenon, if it's like if there was an asteroid hurtling toward Earth, and we got in a room together with all of our friends and had a conversation about what we could do to deflect its course, right? Is that a conspiracy? Like some of.
Oh, okay. It's Sam. He goes off on this tangent at the end about trying to justify conspiracy and how conspiracy itself isn't illegal, but that's not the point here. The point is that these people that believe enough in the powers that be fulfilling what it is that they want for themselves, they're so okay with that, they're willing to just completely back a government-wide conspiracy to fortify an election, we'll say, in the words of Time magazine. I mean, they're okay with subverting the ideal they tout most of all. Bilbo says this show how much you can easily be indoctrinated. Yes, man, and I used to really appreciate Sam Harris I disagreed with him on most things, but this right here, he's lost all credibility to me at all. Joseph Garrett says, we see what Hitler did with the IBM catalog system. Imagine what the new version of fascism will do with the current tech. Amen, dude. I mean, they're already doing it, for God. In reality, they do it all the time. If they want to get access to your phone records, all they got to do is ask the phone company, and then boom, there you go. There's that. There's a story going on in Seattle right now. The former mayor of Seattle is being investigated by the city prosecutor for deleted text messages during the Chaz Chop time, and they're saying that they were unable to recover these text messages. They were deleted, so on and so forth, which is against city law, city code, or whatever it is. And all they have to do, essentially, if they have the same power as the federal government, all they would have to do is ask whatever the carrier was to get the data, and they'd have it. I don't know if the city has that much power and pull, but I would say maybe it's a good thing they don't. But for a fact that the feds wanted it, all they got to do is ask. And there was that big case with Apple about their encryption problem and how they couldn't get records from the cell phone of a terrorist that shot up a bunch of people down in California, because Apple said, we can't give you that info because we've made it so that we can't. That's the way that's supposed to go. This is private information. In the age of everybody skimming data off of everybody, all the government's got to do is ask for it, and they got it. I mean, I would highly doubt the NSA itself doesn't already have it or have access to it, but if that ain't fascism, man, I don't know what is. Yeah, I don't like it, man. None of this is good. None of it's good. It's all bad. We're all doomed. Oh, I wish I had like another fun palate cleanser to end this episode on, because I think, ladies and gentlemen, I think we're going to call it here. Been going for about 2.5 hours. Not too bad for my first solo op. Hopefully we don't have to do this too much more, but I'm not going to lie, I didn't hate it. Bilbo, Garrett, Zeke, everybody, thanks for stopping by. Thanks for hanging out. Watch for this to hit all podcast platforms next week. If you're into that sort of deal, Garrett, you can catch up on the first part of the episode right here on the YouTube at Salt of the Streets. Make sure that you follow us and all the great things that we share on our social medias. I am at BigBird Offie on all the jams. My co-host, brother-in-arms, so on and so forth. Donovan, he is at alpaca_Donovan on Instagram, and at Salt of the Street, singular, on Twitter. yeah, we'll see you there. Everything could be found Salt of the Street style on, just search out on any platform, Salt of the Streets. That's where we're all at. And yeah, Patreon. I have a love-hate relationship with Patreon, obviously, but right now we got to do what we can. If you guys really want to support us, if you believe in what we're doing, please subscribe to our Patreon. We got a monthly newsletter and all sorts of goodies over there. And with that, it's been real, everybody. Thanks for stopping by. We'll see you next time.